arose from matter. Life is built on DNA. You've got to have DNA to arise from matter. But not just DNA, you've got to have a language system. Matter produces a language system. Matter has to produce information. People who believe in evolution don't believe in God, and people say matter gave rise to life. You've got to understand, matter had to give rise to zillions and zillions and zillions and zillions of bits of information, and over millions of years, information keeps coming from matter, new information to form all the different kinds of animals and plants, zillions of bits of information. You know what's interesting? We've never seen matter produce one bit of brand new information that never previously existed, not even one bit. An information scientist, Dr. Werner Gitt, wrote a book called In the Beginning Was Information. He's from Germany. And he makes these statements in that book. There is no known natural law through which matter can give rise to information. And he says this: a code system, in other words, a language, is always the result of a mental process. It requires an intelligent origin or inventor. DNA is a language system and an information system. It could not have come about from matter on its own. It's absolutely impossible. Now you might say to me, well, wait a minute. Well, what do the atheists say about that? What about those people who are scientists who don't believe in God? Don't they have an answer? Oh, I'm glad you asked me that question. I want to show you a video clip of an interview with Dr. Richard Dawkins. Who's heard of Dr. Dawkins? Dr. Richard Dawkins. Oh yeah, I think many of us heard of him. He wrote the book, The God Delusion. He's an atheist. He spends most of his life fighting against someone he doesn't even believe exists. A number of years ago, we had someone who interviewed Dr. Dawkins to ask him this question. Dr. Dawkins, he's an atheist. Can you give an example, we only wanted one, where matter produces information and adds it into the genes? By the way, if evolution is true, it had to happen zillions of times. We just want one example, just one. I want you to see how he answered the question. Watch this.
Professor Dawkins, can you give an example of a genetic mutation or an evolutionary process which can be seen to increase the information in the genome?
There he is giving the right answer right now. Can you hear it? That is the right answer. There's no example. Now you might say, okay, that was years ago. What does Dr. Dawkins say now? Oh, I'm glad you asked me that question too. How many of you have seen the movie called Expelled? Oh yeah, a lot of us have seen Expelled. I want to show you a video clip from that, because here's Dr. Dawkins, who many years after that video clip was asked the question, how did life arise on Earth?
What do you think is the possibility that intelligent design might turn out to be the answer to some issues in genetics or in evolution?
It could come about in the following way. It could be that at some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved by probably some kind of Darwinian means to a very, very high level of technology and designed a form of life that they seeded onto perhaps this planet. Now, that is a possibility and an intriguing possibility. And I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence for that if you look at the details of biochemistry, molecular biology. You might find a signature of some sort of design.
Do you know what he's talking about when he's talking about look at biochemistry and find a signature? He's talking about DNA. You know what he's really acknowledging? DNA cries out there's an intelligence behind the universe. He doesn't believe in God, so it had to be some intelligence from outer space that brought life to Earth. Let's go on.
Biology, you might find a signature of some sort of designer.
Wait a second. Richard Dawkins thought intelligent design might be a legitimate pursuit?
And that designer could well be a higher intelligence from elsewhere in the universe. Well, but that higher intelligence would itself have had to have come about by some explicable or ultimately explicable process. It couldn't have just jumped into existence spontaneously. That's the point.
So Professor Dawkins was not against intelligent design, just certain types of designers, such as God.
Well, there you have it. There's one of the leading atheists in the world giving you the evidence to support his faith that life evolved. It came to Earth from outer space. And think about that for a moment, by the way. Dr. Dawkins, how did life on Earth get here? Well, maybe some civilization out there in outer space that it itself evolved, had to bring life to Earth. So if you go back to that planet, wherever it is, and you said to him, well, how did life on this planet first come about? Well, I guess his answer would be, well, there was another planet out there somewhere where life evolved and they brought life to that planet, they brought it to this planet. Well, okay, let's go back to that planet now. Now, how did life come about on that planet? Well, there must have been another planet somewhere out there and life evolved. And he mocks at us for believing in an infinite creator God. Do you know what? It's the atheist that has a blind faith because the evidence does not confirm their faith. What we see in biochemistry confirms in the beginning God. Isn't it exciting being a Christian? It really is. Dr. Dawkins has a blind faith. As Christians, we don't have a blind faith. Students, don't get the idea that Christians have a blind faith. Ours is not a blind faith, because if the Bible really is a revelation from God, and He's given us the true history here and where things came from and what life is all about, it'll make sense of the world. And it does. And science, true observational science, will confirm the Bible's history. And it does, over and over again. But then how do we answer questions like this? I remember I was at one conference, a little boy, I think he was about 7 years old, who came up to me and he said, "Mr. Ham," yes, "well, who made God?" Oh, don't you just love those questions? And from a little boy like that, so how am I going to answer that? So I looked at him and said, "Well, son, if somebody made God, that'd have to be a bigger God who made God. Would that be right?" "Oh, yes, sir." "Well, if you've got a bigger God who made God, then who made the bigger God? You have to have a bigger God who made the bigger God who made God, right?" "Oh, yes, sir." "Well, who made the bigger God? You'd have to have a bigger God who made the bigger God who made the bigger God who made God, right?" "Oh, yes, sir." "Do you know the only thing that makes sense, son?" "What's that, sir?" You've got to have the biggest God of all, an infinite creator God. It's the only thing that makes logical sense. Young people, you learn at school about the laws of nature. Why are there laws that are the same today and tomorrow? If it's a random universe, it came about by random processes, why do we have the laws of nature? How can you trust them? Why do we have the laws of logic? If it's a random universe, why have the laws of logic? How do you know that your logic is the right logic, that it evolved the right way? How do you know that you're really understanding somebody else the way you need to? See, the only thing that makes logical sense is a biblical God. In fact, non-Christians and atheists like Richard Dawkins have to borrow from biblical principles to do their scientific research, because he believes in the laws of nature and he believes in the laws of logic, which only makes sense in the context of a